People of Reddit, what was your biggest OSH moment? Coming out of a test and realizing my calculator was in radians. When I heard my dentist say OSH while over tightening my dental implant. When I was accidentally shot in the thigh when I was downrange setting targets up. When I texted my wife complaining about what a nasty bee my mother was acting like, only to realize I had texted it to my mother. That sensation of breaking out into a cold sweat because you know what happened and yet it's 2 seconds too late to take it back. When I thought I had sprained my ankle, then 2 days later it swelled to 3x its normal size and started turning black. I had actually broke my foot in 6 places. I sprained my ankle by stepping in a really deep hole in a field. I couldn't walk for 2 days. I didn't have insurance so never got it checked and worked a 60 hours work week after my 2 days off because my work was short-handed and I need the money. My ankle was never the same. I could crack it on command. Fast forward 3 years, I break my leg and when they were doing the x-ray I actually cracked off both the little nubs that form the socket for my foot. How I broke my leg there was no chance it did any damage to my ankle so I just never brought it up and they assumed it all happened at the same time. I had a thyroid nodule biopsy at the end of 2017. They said if the result was benign, they would email me. 6 days later, they called me. OSH, yeah right, learned with doctors if they call, it's serious. If they call as soon as possible after the test is done, it's very, very serious. Realizing I left food on table when I went traveling. 5 weeks later we come back and it's filled with worms. Sounds like extra protein to me. I'm a pre-K, 3-year-old, teacher. Started panicking because I only counted 7 children following me instead of the usual 8. Thought I was going to jail and everything. I was holding the 8th child in my arms. Mornings are fun. Before I was properly diagnosed I was walking around with a tumor blocking my spinal canal. One day I was coming home from getting lunch and I was wearing those big, platform, orthopedic flip-flops you can buy, because all the orthopedists and podiatrists I saw told me my leg pain and foot numbness were because of my flat feet. Thanks guys. Seriously like 2 inches thick. Anyway I stick my key in the door and all of a sudden realize that my left leg is missing. Like, data deleted, no longer there, nothing. I remember going, what the wash as I toppled over and cracked my ankle because of the flip-flops. Thankfully the feeling in my leg came back just in time for me to feel the hideous crack and almost vomit all over my doorstep from the pain and shock. That was my biggest OSH moment of my life. Partially because I fell and hurt myself so badly, partially because it caught me so off guard, and also mainly because I'd never felt anything like that before. It wasn't like a leg going numb when you sit on it for too long. It was like my leg wasn't there at all and never had been. Scariest moment of my life by far. Realizing after getting home from my first week at a new job at corporate headquarters that I left my wallet with my new company credit card, license, personal credit card, and $100 cash in the back of the seat on the airplane. I got it back but it took a month. I had to tell my new boss that I already lost the company card, which had around a $30 K limit. Good times. It's more of an OSH that happened to me. I was having a standard cardiology test where they were trying to get my heart to recreate an event that had previously happened. My heart wasn't cooperating and the doctor told the nurse to put something in my IV to raise my heart rate in hopes of recreating the event. I immediately felt like I had just run at full effort for 10 minutes and my heart was beating so hard and so fast, and I assume out of rhythm, that I began to black out. The nurse and the doctor started yelling something that I honestly can't remember and then a crash cart was brought in and they gave me something else that brought my heart rate down. I have episodes of tachycardia and bradycardia as well as having a sinus arrhythmia and periodic atrial fibrillation. Was driving south on 95 through Virginia. A car was doing over 100 and I followed it but from really far behind. A cop car was hiding in median in the trees. He came flying out and almost sideswiped me. We were face to face for a second. I thought he might pull me over afterwards but he just went after the first guy, but it was so close to us clipping each other at high speed. When the doctor at the urgent care told my mom to quote go straight to the emergency room, you don't need to pay for this visit. biking down a short but steep hill doing 30 miles per hour to keep up with traffic. Driver about 3 cars ahead of me stops abruptly at a crosswalk. I lay onto my brakes but feel my wheels start to slip. Instantly had that sense of time slowing down to the point where I could make reasoned and considered decisions. Looking ahead, I could run into the car ahead of me, attempt to shoot the gap between the cars and the curb but also risk hitting the pedestrian in the crosswalk. Or I could go down on the grassy verge, decide that the last option looks best for everyone, but then realize that there's a tree in my way. Managed to roll into the fall so that my shoulder and rib cage took the impact, didn't even hit my head. Ended up a little battered, especially since I jammed my pinky in the ground. But after sitting around to recover my breath, I managed to ride home not too much the worse for wear. No broken bones and I only had to take 1 day off of work, though it was a while before my finger wasn't sore and stiff. I'm impressed how well you examined the situation in such a short time and managed to walk away without any broken bones. If it was me, I would have rammed into the car ahead of me. Adrenaline, or at least I've always assumed it's adrenaline that does it. Doesn't actually slow time down but ramps up the processing speed of your brain in a situation where it looks like you are moments away from certain death. You can analyze so many potential solutions to your predicament in that moment, because if you don't, well, you're dead. Better alive and suddenly exhausted from spending that much energy that fast. Copy pasted some very descriptive dialogue from some erotica I had been writing into the group chat with all my in-laws instead of a link to a meme. Last night when the tornado sirens went off in Middle Tennessee, my house just barely missed the flight path. Homes ripped to shreds, people dead and missing, and still no power. I don't think I've ever been so scared holding on to my kids. The time I was taking a shower and the shower control broke off as I was adjusting the temperature, not just the handle, but the mechanism it controlled. Hot water came gushing out of the wall, and there was no shut-off valve for it. The only way to stop the water was to turn off the main valve for the whole house. When my husband was driving me to the hospital to give birth, it was such a mind-f moment, realizing that it was the last time with just me and my husband, and the next time I would go home I would have a baby with me. Finding a painful lump in my bowel sac, thought I had cancer for sure, but it turned out to be a tiny third testicle that had gotten irritated somehow. I went into the doc expecting to come out less a ball. Instead I have a spare now. My wife was out of state at a funeral, leaving me with our 1-year-old daughter. I walked out of the kitchen on Sunday morning to find the baby drinking a bottle of infant Tylenol. I have no idea how she got it, or how she got the child-proof cap off. A child-sized dose is only 3 milliliters. Cue me calling poison control with an ER nurse on hold, frantically trying to put my shoes on. I was running laps around the football, soccer, field, and looked down for a second. The blur of my moving feet looked kinda cool, and so I stayed looking down watching it for a few bit. In retrospect, not a good idea. As I moved my head to look up, I caught a split-second glimpse of the goalpost before running into it face first. Went to the hospital and had a black eye for a few months. TL. Doctor ran into a goalpost. I was in high school and my BF was driving me to work in a snowstorm. It was really slippery out and we were in a tiny car. Looked up, saw a full-size truck with a trailer behind coming towards us. It made a left turn in front of us. No way we could stop in time. I said oh sh, fainted, wet the windshield with my head. Woke up in the ambulance once and then again in the hospital. Headache for almost a month. Opened my chat with my boyfriend and saw along a wall of text the entire B-movie script. I was at work doing what I was supposed to do. I found out later that I had been doing it wrong. This one goes back to the olden times, when people right out of college could buy houses. Yes, those times existed. Way back. My wife and I bought our first house, a major fixer-upper. It had an old convection gas floor furnace, think a gas-fired waffle iron built into the floor, that had not been used in decades. But we thought it was worth a try to get it fired up until we could install central heat. Since natural gas was much cheaper than the electric space heaters, that was the other option. To get to the pilot light for the furnace I had to belly slide through the crawl space. And I do mean belly slide. There was not nearly enough room to actually crawl on hands and knees, and the umpty million nails projecting through the floor from the hardwood floor overhead would remind me very painfully if I got up too high. Initial inspection. Using one of those old flashlights that goes dark every time you jar it, and comes back on if you shake it just right. Remember those? No, you whippersnappers have it easy. Revealed a pile of spent matches inside the furnace next to the pilot, indicating people had had a lot of trouble lighting it in the past. The shutoff valve was stuck closed also, but didn't look corroded. I figured if I ever got the valve to turn, it might be okay. I came back with a pair of large pliers and a propane torch. My idea was to use the pliers to give me a little more leverage to gently work the valve open, then use the torch on a low flame to light the pilot light, taking as long as I needed without holding a match that burned down to my fingers. I felt clever. I got set up, light prop to illuminate the valve, torch lit on a low flame, and was working on the valve carefully and slowly when a small movement just past the furnace caught my eye. A large bobcat had been backed into the corner by the nasty man with the light and the hissing blowtorch, and Kitty was obviously very unhappy with the situation. His eyes were fixed on my arm, which was extended towards him at full stretch. Working with the pliers, he was about 4 feet from my hand, and his back end was making that little wiggle that cats do just before the launch. I instinctively jerked my hand back, but in so doing I seemed to have clenched down on the pliers. Did you know that using pliers you can rip the guts out of a gas valve with very little effort? You can. A spring or something from the valve hit me sharply in the nose. My elbow hit both the flashlight and the torch on the way back. One of them went out. It was the wrong one. The propane torch went spinning off about 10 feet, still lighted with a tiny blue flame in otherwise total darkness. The wide open gas pipe blew a cooling jet of natural gas into my sweaty face. So, I was trapped on my belly, inches from nails over my back, in total darkness, with a panicked bobcat, a wide open gas line, and a live flame. You don't forget moments like that. It lasted about 6 or 7 hours, by my estimation. I felt around with my left hand and found the remains of the gas valve in the pipe, and stuck my finger in it. To my immense surprise and considerable relief, I discovered that gas pressure is way lower than water pressure. Unlike a water pipe, you can stop a gas leak with your finger. Feel around with my right hand, find the flashlight, shake it and it turns back on. Look at Bobcat, who is magically no longer there. He has taken the opportunity to somehow teleport right past me without touching me or making a sound. He's gone. Thank you, MR. Bobcat. Okay, look around a little more. Find the part of the gas valve I ripped out right next to the pliers. It slides in the valve body quite easily. Slight click as it seats. No leak evident. I find the little spring thing that hit me on the nose, and it's some sort of retaining ring that snaps neatly on the valve to keep the parts in place. I spit on the valve and smear it around. No bubbles. Wow, it really doesn't leak. Who would have thought? I retrieve the torch, open the valve, which now turns like it's brand new, and have the furnace lit in about 2 minutes. I crawl out from under the house and wife says, did you know that a gigantic kitty ran out from under the house while you were working? I think you scared him.